Hello, everybody. Welcome into another episode of the Fantasy Pros Football Podcast. I am Ryan, warmly joined on this Thursday morning by Andrew Erickson and by Derek Brown. Fellas, I did not do this show last week. I am back. Thank you once again to Joey P for filling in for me last Thursday morning. We are on to week 14 in most leagues, in kind of a standard setting league. This is the final week of the regular season. We are almost at the finish line, guys. It is wild how fast it goes. We're talking some must sits this morning. We will start where we always do with the running back position. We will start with you, Erickson.
I'm going to sit Breece Hall this week. He's dealing with an ankle injury. I think the matchup is okay against the Texans, but they're playing at home. And MetLife Stadium, there are no points scored in this stadium. Whether it's the Jets playing, the Giants playing, teams don't score points here. So we saw Dalvin Cook get a little bit more involved last week. You have Zach Wilson coming in as starting quarterback again after he was benched and was pouting. Dalvin Cook had 10 touches last week in week 13, which is the most that he's seen in a long time. So just the stigma around the Jets is just not good right now. So even though the matchup I think is okay, I don't think that it's so great that you can rely on Breece Hall, who's basically just getting it done as a receiver. Like that's pretty much all that he's been able to do. I mean, Dalvin Cook rushed for more yards than Breece Hall did last week. So again, I think we're going to see Cook involved again. And Breece Hall, you're just hoping gets a bunch of dump-off targets from Zach Wilson, who, yes, he was still targeting Breece Hall at a pretty high rate, but not as high as these backup quarterbacks for the Jets, where you've seen Breece Hall's receiving numbers really spike. If it comes down a little bit, it's just going to hurt him more. So, again, I think that leaving Hall on the bench for someone with more upside makes a lot of sense. Like, what are you going to miss if you bench Breece Hall? Like, are the Jets going to score at all? Like, are they going to score a touchdown? Call me skeptical.
I mean, he's RB22 in ECR right now and half PPR scoring, even taking into consideration those catches he's having. In the last 5 weeks, RB27, RB30, RB13, RB30, RB25. So for the last 5 weeks, he has not even been as high as RB22. Also didn't practice on Wednesday. I could see him even dropping down further than 22. Where do you have him, Erickson?
I have Breece Hall, RB24. So, yeah, I mean, look. There's only 2 teams on bye this week, so I think that there are ways to get around not playing him. I think at the end of the day, like, you're probably trying to get away from playing Jets players, and you're only playing them because, hey, Breece Hall gets touches, Garrett Wilson, gets targets, but you know that the ceiling isn't ever going to be there for any Jets player.
Yeah, DBro, it looks like you've got Hall right at 22, so in line with consensus in your half PPR
we're talking
rankings.
about this, and I'm actually moving him down to RB25 because I can't make a good case for Breece Hall. Like, I wrote this up in the primer. I'm like, he's their wide receiver too. And on the Jets offense, that's not a good role to have, people. And I would take the under on 1 touchdown. I mean, come on. Has anybody watched the Jets offense? I mean, good Lord, man, it's terrible.
I don't want to spend too much time on Breece Hall, but I am kind of curious what you guys think. Like, this has been such a lost year given the state of the offense and him coming back from the injury. He had a couple of really good games in the middle of the season, but that's also been more than a month away from now. Just quickly, what round do you think he's going to go in 2024 drafts, DBro? Because this is a guy that everybody was super high on aside from the injury and now aside from the bad offense.
He will not leave the second round, assuming Rodgers comes back.
Yeah, assuming a reasonable quarterback situation in New York. Erickson, do you agree with that second round probably next year?
Yeah, I think so. I think that he's going to get steamed up. And again, another year
He'll probably get
removed.
steamed to the back end of the first, to be honest.
Another year removed from the injury, I think is going to be a really big selling point, regardless of, the quarterback, because he just really hasn't been his explosive self that we saw as a rookie. And I mean, that was kind of be expected just based on, him coming off an injury last year.
Yeah.
Well, the offensive line has been, terrible doesn't even cover it. I mean, they've been bottom 3 in run blocking all year. And I don't know if that changes next year either.
Yeah. All right, we can move on from Breece Hall. DBro, who you got for your first must-sit running back?
Man, this is a guy that I went heavy on last week, ranked him aggressively. The matchup was great, and whoo, did he fall on his face. And part of it wasn't just so much Devin Singletary, but I'm sitting in, man. It only took Dameon Pierce getting a little bit healthier for him to take back over the early down role. And then Devin Singletary, who, it's crazy to me. He goes out and he balls out for 2 to 3 games, plays extremely well. Houston Texans said, doesn't matter. It's all good. We're going to cut your snaps to 46%. He only got 9 touches last game, and it's not a good matchup. We're talking about the Jets. One of the few things they actually do well is still play defense. And since week 8, the Jets have the 10th highest stuff rate and 6th lowest yards after contact per attempt allowed. And so with Devin Singletary, man, like I don't see a path to a floor. I don't see a path to a ceiling. I don't see it with him. So I think people need to understand that he's not this workhorse bell cow guy that you were plugging into your lineups. He's not even close to that now. So you can't play him.
I'm stepping on our Who Do I Start tool section that's going to come up in a little bit, but would you rather start Singletary or Dameon Pierce this week, DBro?
Pierce. I mean, Pierce even got the goal line touch. So give me the guy that, if I'm picking somebody from this backfield, I'll take the 12 carries and maybe the goal line look, because I don't think that Singletary gets that.
Yeah. Erickson, hit me with your next must-sit running back.
Sit the big dog, Derrick Henry, because playing on the road, you can't play Derrick Henry on the road, guys. Like, talk about this in the Betting Pros primer. The Titans are a completely different team when they play at home versus on the road. I've been ranking Derrick Henry super aggressively the last couple weeks, like inside the top 5, because he was playing at home and he was scoring touchdowns and rushing for a lot of yards, and it was looking good. But this week, he's playing on the road as 2 touchdown underdogs in Miami Dolphins. So the matchup itself, just on the surface, okay, this team's going to be falling from behind. That's horrible for Derrick Henry. In negative game script, you're probably going to see more of Tajay Spears anyway. So just based on how the game projects to play, it's not a good spot for Derrick Henry. But then when you look at what the Miami defense has actually done against running backs, so overall in the season, they're top 10 against running backs in fantasy. They are the number 3 best DST versus running backs over the last 4 weeks. They're allowing the second lowest explosive run rate, under 6%, which is tied with the Minnesota Vikings. And every week we talk about don't play running backs against the Vikings because they're going to shut you down. So Miami is going to shut down this running game and make the Titans one-dimensional with Will Levis chucking the ball down the field trying to play catch-up. And what does that mean? Derrick Henry's not even going to be in the game. So I think that this is a spot. Yes, I know he's been super productive, but you have to realize that he plays, and this entire offense plays a totally different when they're not at home, because their offensive line is not good, and it's much harder for a bad offensive line to play better on the road. It just is. That's just facts, especially with the Tennessee Titans. So Derrick Henry, it's a big name I'm throwing out here, but there's a reason why he was like inside the top 8 ECR the last 2 weeks, and this week I believe his ECR is like around 20. Like, that's a significant drop off because the matchup is so bad for Derrick Henry on Monday night.
It is 20 exactly in ECR.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, last 5 weeks, his RB finish in half PPR. 3 of them have been top 6. The other 2 were outside the top 36. So it's been extremely...
And where were those games played? Not in Tennessee.
It's been extremely hit or miss. And yes, those were both road games there. Where do you have him this week, DBro?
I've got him at 20, but I mean, really, it just kind of comes down to that range of running backs. You're just kind of picking your flavor, you know? So I probably will move Derrick Henry down a little bit further. Like, I think honestly, like Derrick Henry versus Chuba Hubbard is an extremely interesting conversation. I mean, considering that we saw how much work we saw Chuba get, and I think he's going to get that again this week, and the Saints are a good matchup. So I'm probably going to be moving Henry down, but he's still going to stick somewhere like probably like 24 to 27 range when it's all said and done.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. Fellas, arguably the single biggest reason I moved to Denver is for the skiing. There's absolutely nothing I love more than getting a cabin in the mountains for a couple of days, heading up with some good friends and hitting the slopes. The only thing better is capping off the day with a beer, but not just any beer, Miller Lite, the 96-calorie beer that tastes like beer and is perfectly brewed for everything winter has to offer. I've said this before, but if I'm ranking possible settings for a beer, that first post-shower, post-ski day beer is my 101 with a bullet. Cracking that Miller Lite just hits different. Of course, if you're skiing with my friends, that might not be your first Miller Lite of the day. More often than not, we're cracking one on the ski lift as well, getting up early for first tracks, riding up that lift with a few Miller Lites stashed away in your pockets. Yeah, that's always a good call. So the next time you want to make the most of your winter memories, whether you're at an ugly Christmas sweater party, enjoying the game with pals, or sharing laughter on the slopes, live those winter moments with Miller Lite. With a Miller Lite in your hand, winter doesn't just taste great, it tastes like Miller time. To get Miller Lite delivered right to your door, visit MillerLite.com/FantasyPros. That's MillerLite.com/FantasyPros. Or you can find it pretty much anywhere that sells beer. Celebrate responsibly. Miller Brewing Company, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. 96 calories and 3.2 carbs per 12 ounces. DBro, where's your 101 setting for cracking open a Miller Lite? Mine, like I said, after a long day on the slopes. Yours, and is not allowed to be in the hot tub on the Fantasy Pros team trip.
I was fixing to say 2 a.m. hot tub Fantasy Pros retreat. No, can't use that. Okay, fine, worm. Then mine probably is 4 p.m. on the boat in the ocean, saltwater fishing, and it's about 102 degrees outside, and we're on the way back to the camp.
So I was gonna say, I mean, I haven't really done much saltwater fishing, but I'm with you on a boat is a very strong contender. It's definitely a first round pick. What about you, Erickson?
Beach, anywhere, like just heat. If it's hot out, there's nothing like more refreshing than cracking a cold one.
Yeah, we all love Miller Lite on this show. DBro, hit me with your next must sit running back.
Man, the tires are flat, baby. Got to get off the Gus bus. It's not going anywhere. It's staying in neutral. It's in park. It's not a fun ride. He's not the leader of this backfield anymore, man. That's Keaton Mitchell. And I know people might play Gus Edwards, and I bring him up because he's been one of those like high-end kind of flex plays, RB2, RB3, weekly basis. And people are like, well, I mean, it's not a bad bet to chase the touchdowns. And you can still do that. But unless Gus gets a touchdown, you're going to be extremely upset with yourself that you played him. And looking at this matchup, if Baltimore wants to move the ball, they're going to have to pass because you cannot run on the Rams. So looking at the Rams since week 8, second lowest explosive run rate, third lowest rushing touchdown rate. So even if you're playing for the touchdowns with Gus, probably ain't going to happen. So I think the people need to be sitting Gus and understand also that Keaton Mitchell is that guy now.
So the one thing with Gus that I will say, and I'm with you on almost all these points, is the weather in Baltimore this Sunday is heavy rains and heavy winds. That is the type of game that just screams like Gus Edwards run around kind of in the mud, in the muck, and a very like ugly game that is relying on this physical ground game. Does that change your opinion at all on starting Gus this week?
No, not really. I am a known weather fader. I don't care about the weather unless it's like monsoon season and we're talking about sustained 25-mile-an-hour winds and things like that. A lot of the things that you look at, rain doesn't make that big of a difference, again, unless it's like a monsoon. So for me, I fade a lot of the weather. I mean, some of that just kind of comes from my DFS approach. So yeah, I don't really care if it's raining or if it's sunny.
D-Row, I'm going to step on a second one of the who do I start, comparisons I brought for you, because it's, again, two guys in the same backfield, and you already mentioned them both. Gus Edwards and Keaton Mitchell in ECR are back-to-back in the rankings. Who are you starting between the two? Is it actually Mitchell, like you said?
Oh, it's Mitchell. It's definitely Mitchell, man. I want the guy that you talk about, not like, I'm not banking on the fact of what he has to do as far as at the goal line. If either one of these guys, who am I going to bank on the fact of who has the juice, who can break off a 40 or 50 yard run? I don't think that's Gus. I know we've seen it do it a few times this year. I know the the 70 or 80 yard reception he got.
Yeah, that was like a broken play though.
I was going to say, I'm not hoping for that. So give me Keaton Mitchell, man.
Yeah. All right, Erickson, give me your next must sit guy.
Kenneth Walker. If he plays in this matchup, I know that he is participating in practice, but so is Zach Charbonnet. So I don't know how this backfield's going to shake out. When they were both healthy before Walker's injury, Charbonnet was eating into Walker's role as a receiver. He wasn't seeing a lot of targets, but he was running a lot of routes. So, look, but with them both coming off injuries and if they're both playing, we're going to see a committee approach. That's what I would guess. And it's a horrible matchup. They're playing on the road against the 49ers, who are going to score 30 points at least. And that means they're going to be trailing. So I know Seattle made magic happen last Thursday night against Dallas. I just don't know if we're going to see it again, 2 weeks in a row with Geno hitting DK Metcalf for these big plays, keeping them in the game. Geno Smith has been really bad against the 49ers the last 4 times he's played them as the starting quarterback for the Seahawks. So I'm just worried about the Seahawks offense overall. And committee, horrible matchup on the road. 49ers, third best defense in terms of allowing points to running backs this season. So, yeah, I get that. A lot of times you want to start running backs. If they're coming back from injury, we've seen it work with Kyron Williams obviously coming back. He had a massive game, but we've also seen the other side of the coin where Achane came back and did nothing. So Walker for me is just, I got to see it first before I can put it back.
So where are you going to rank him? Because ECR has not caught up to that. He's kind of maybe a little bit back on the practice field. Let's assume he plays, because again, most experts are ranking him as if they're not ranking him. He's not going to play. He's ECR like RB 64 or something. That will go up if he's playing, obviously. But where do you think you'll actually have him if he is healthy?
So I have him, I think, at RB 27. So, I mean, they're both going to be in the RB3 range, him and Charbonnet.
Yep.
But it's really more or less like, I mean, if you're going to start somebody, you're going to start Walker because he's been the starter when both of them have been healthy. But it's really like, hey, this is more of a desperation volume play because sometimes you're just stuck and you're like, I have to start a second running back. Whereas I'd rather flex a receiver. Like, it's going to be flex X receiver here versus Kenneth Walker. Like, always going to probably take the wide receiver, but you're going to have to only start Walker if, hey, I have to start another RB too. Like, who do I play? And Walker would probably be that guy for most people.
Yeah, DBro, if you go to the staff rankings, you can see Fitz has him RB27, Erickson has him RB27. You got him RB80, but that's obviously injury related. So where will you have him if he's
very
healthy and
bold
playing?
80.
I mean, I kind of lean on the fact that, like, I don't think that he plays this week, but if he does play, I'm with Erickson. I'm holding hands. Like, I think it's RB3 range, and if you're gonna pick, like, who am I gonna rank? So if Charbonnet is out, I almost can make you a decent case to rank DJ Dallas maybe ahead of Ken Walker, because if they're trailing, Ken Walker's been the early down guys in the previous iterations of this backfield. Like, when we've seen Charbonnet have the role, Charbonnet's been the passing down guy. So if we think Seattle's going to trail them, which the line, the spread, everything, all those things tell us that, then DJ Dallas might actually get more work, also being the healthiest guy out of this backfield, than even Ken Walker, assuming Charbonnet is out. So Walker's an RB3 and not a great one to me.
DBro, sticking with you, give me your last must-sit running back.
It's Khalil Herbert, man. I don't know what to make out of this backfield for Chicago, but I know one damn thing. I know that Khalil Herbert's probably not going to lead them in touches. You look at his workload, went from 18 touches in week 11 all the way down to 8. And he played 21% of the snaps. Now, I wrote this up in the primer. Maybe that had something to do with, Minnesota's going to blitz a lot. They don't trust him in pass protection. Who knows, man? I mean, like, Khalil Herbert could go out there and get 8 touches. He can go out there and get 15 touches. And neither one of those would surprise me. But regardless of that, the matchup is terrible. And if this does stay Roshan's backfield, you're going to not want to play Khalil Herbert. So I don't care that he got 18 touches that week. The week before that, when he played, he got 10. The week before that, he got 22. I'm not going to stay married to previous volume. If you're looking for a flex play to get into your lineup, it's not Khalil Herbert, man.
Herbert is RB35 in ECR. Is that too high, too low, or just right, DBro?
It's too high. I think that's about the range where people should be looking at Roshan. He will be my highest ranked Chicago Bears running back this week.
Let's jump into a little more in the Who Do I Start tool. For everybody listening, this is free to use at fantasypros.com/start. Anybody can head there, put in your own start or sit questions up to 4 players at a time, which is a feature I really like. You can even pick and choose from which experts your decision draws. Again, that's free to use at fantasypros.com/start. Erickson, Derrick Henry, or James Cook this week?
I guess I'd probably start James Cook.
You sound really convicted in that.
I mean, I just don't love Cook's role in his offense.
I'll say James Cook easy. I'll take James Cook. It's not even close to me.
How about Derrick Henry or DeAndre Swift, who are back-to-back in ECR?
I'm going to take Swift. I'm just looking at game environments. Like, Swift is just playing in a game that's going to be fast-paced, going to be a ton of scoring, so he could fall in the end zone, whereas Derrick Henry's like, sick, we're down 14. He's not even on the field. He's not in the game. Hard to score points when you're not on the field.
And then it was hard to come up with names for Walker because, like I said, in our actual consensus rankings, he hasn't moved up yet since starting to practice. But who are just some names that might surprise people that you would start over Walker this week?
Keaton Mitchell, Alexander Mattison, Dameon Pierce.
Erickson starting Alexander Mattison. You know that's a significant decision from him. DBro, I already asked you a couple of yours because they came up naturally in your segment. So I've just got one for you. Khalil Herbert or Tajay Spears?
I'll go Spears. I mean, Erickson's laid out the case here. Even if Spears is getting the empty calorie snaps, I still would rather go with those than no snaps at all for Khalil Herbert.
Let's move into the wide receivers here, guys. We went a little long on the running backs. Erickson, must-sit wide receiver number 1. Who you got?
Cooper Kupp. You talked about this game being kind of gross from a weather standpoint, so it's just avoid all Rams receiver. Like, if you don't, especially Cooper Kupp. Like, we talked about him as a sit last week, and I was right, except for he scored a touchdown, but still had no yards again. Look at Cooper Kupp. He hasn't had 50 receiving yards since week 6. What week is it, guys? It's week 14. He has had 50 receiving yards. Like, and it's not that he's not getting opportunities. Like, the targets are there. Routes are there. Snaps are all there for Cooper Kupp. So I don't know if he's actually hurt or not. I don't know if he's dealing with the injury. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe he's just not the same guy. Again, guys get hurt and they don't always come back as the same elite producers. Like, this happens. So as an older player, maybe we're just starting to see the downward trend of Cooper Kupp. And I just think right now in this matchup that is absolutely horrible against the Ravens in bad weather for a dome team, like we've seen two like good teams go to Baltimore and just absolutely lay eggs. Geno Smith and Jared Goff. I think Matthew Stafford in this passing game is going to be the third offense to do so, especially if the weather's bad. So I'm
notably both NFC teams, and again, Rams, another NFC team coming. We know Lamar usually crushes
West Coast
them,
to East Coast, a dome team. Like,
all the
just
narratives
so many
are in favor of
get out. Like, I have to start Cooper Kupp in one of my dynasties because like everyone else is hurt, and I'm like, sick.
Isn't it crazy though? Like we were talking before the show about Tyreek Hill's MVP chances, and we were comparing him to, well, if Cooper Kupp couldn't win in 2021, that was 2 years ago that Cooper Kupp was the greatest player in fantasy history. Not literally, but like an awesome season just 2 seasons ago, and now here 2023. It's
these receivers like Cooper Kupp peaked. Michael Thomas, remember he was like the guy, and then it was just done. And
Lifetime ago.
Michael Thomas too, like his year where he was talked about as MVP. I mean, he had 2 different quarterbacks. Like if there was ever a season to give it to a receiver, it'd be like one that his quarterback actually got hurt and he still put up absolute monster numbers. And yet, no, it wasn't the MVP. So, yep, that's that trajectory that we don't like to see from Kupp.
They say the NFL stands for not for long, and they are right. DBro, give me your first must-sit wide receiver.
DeAndre Hopkins, man. I don't want any receivers that are trying to catch uncatchable targets from Will Levis. Depending on how you want to talk about Levis, the offensive line, his quarterback play just in general, it doesn't lean you to want to play DeAndre Hopkins, much less if we look at the matchup. Matchup is terrible, man. He's going to be running most of his routes against Xavier Howard and Jalen Ramsey. Jalen Ramsey, since he's come back, has allowed a 36% catch rate and a 7.4 passer rating in his coverage. Miami has shut down boundary receivers since week 8, 6th lowest PPR points per target allowed to boundary receivers. Add in all of this stuff, and if you play DeAndre Hopkins, it's going to be the same thing as if you put mayo in your coffee. You're going to hate life.
Jeez. Erickson, you and Fitz are both a few spots higher on Hopkins than DBro is. Are you looking at this game differently, or it's just it could have been in a number of different places?
I just think that he's going to get targets. And again, he if he gets 12 targets, catches 4 of them, like he could go for 50, 60 yards.
Actually, 4 of those 12 are actually catchable. So let's just throw that out there. That's what I mean.
It's just like they're going to be trailing, and they're not afraid to have Will Levis just rip it ball down. It only takes one ball for DeAndre Hopkins to come down with a deep ball for him to put up fantasy points. So that's why I kind of view him in that range, because I just think that they're going to have to throw the ball a lot in Miami because I think they're going to be trailing.
People give me a hard time for like my, appetite and diet a lot because I can't smell, so I like eat things differently. Even I wouldn't do mayo and coffee. That is like very much several steps too far.
It's not actually real though. It's like a bit.
I didn't know that. Is it a bit?
No,
I
it's a
haven't
bit.
seen that.
It's a bit, but he's actually done it. Like you could not even pay me. You could not even pay me to do that. Like I would straight up bomb.
I didn't think he did it all the time, but I thought he had actually done it at least once, which I would not do. Erickson, give me your next must-sit receiver.
Calvin Ridley. Don't want it. Not against the Browns. No Trevor Lawrence potentially. I can't have it happen. So Ridley's already been a super boomer bust wide receiver all year long. He's essentially Gabe Davis wearing a Jaguars jersey. Even last week, we saw like the entire experience with Calvin Ridley. It's like he's getting open sometimes, but then he doesn't catch like balls when he's open. He makes a great catch, called back by a penalty. So he always sees like high value targets every single week. And it's just like, is this the week he comes down with them or doesn't convert them into actual production? So he's been so matchup dependent that he booms in the really good matchups, with Zay Jones in the lineup, etc. But this is a matchup against the Browns. They're playing on the road. The Browns have been a totally different defense at home versus on the road. Like on the road, they've been actually like legitimate bad. Like teams have been able to score points on the Browns, but at home in Ohio, like no offense is going in there and being productive. So again, with Trevor Lawrence banged up, potentially not playing, I want no part of Calvin Ridley, especially with Denzel Ward now off the injury report. He's going to play in this game, and the Browns have missed him. So I think Ward's going to lock up Calvin Ridley.
DBro, how are you approaching the Jags offense in general, assuming Trevor Lawrence is out this week?
It's It's pretty gross, man. I mean, Ridley.
Are you starting anybody? Like in the passing game, at least?
In the passing game, it's rough, man. I mean, I think in deep leagues, I wrote up Parker Washington makes some sense. I understand if people have to start Ridley, and we're going to get to Evan Ingram and stuff, but like, you better temper your expectations. If you need ceiling out of your lineup, you're probably not going to get it from Ridley. You're probably not going to get it from Ingram. So you need to... If you have to play with either one of those guys, you need to make up for that type of ceiling other spots in your lineup. Like, I don't want to play those guys unless I absolutely have to.
DBro, let me stick with you here for your next must-sit wide receiver.
Oh, man. Is Chris Godwin ever going to have a good game the rest of the season? I know they keep talking about it. I know they keep talking about getting him more involved and what that looks like, and then he goes out and just posts another stinker. So I don't know if we see another good Chris Godwin game for the rest of the season, man. It's just, it has not happened. He's wide receiver 44 in fantasy points per game. He's had zero double-digit fantasy point outings since week 8, guys. We're in week freaking 14. He can't even get to double digits in fantasy points since week 8. There's no way in hell I'm playing him in fantasy.
I'm now that the buys are done, I'm not even sure I would want to roster him. Like, I know the name and like you think about the upside of a guy like of his talent that he's had in his career, but he's just not performed like a viable option. And with the buys wrapping up at the end of this week, there's only 2 this week. Your bench is less relevant. Like, I would very strongly consider dropping him for like a high upside, like backup running back that could fall into a starting role or something. Like, do you think that's reasonable, DBro? Like, I think
it's absolutely
what's he doing on my team?
reasonable.
I'm not playing him.
I mean, you could drop Chris Godwin, and I would not have any qualms about it, and pick up, I mean, talking about like shallow benches, smaller leagues, things like that. Like if JSN is out there, hell, I'd even rather play Elijah Moore this week, assuming Amari Cooper is out. I don't care if Joe Flacco's throwing the damn ball. Give me Elijah Moore over Chris Godwin. He's put up more consistent production.
I do care that Joe Flacco's still throwing him the ball because Flacco loves to throw to Elijah Moore. That's actually helpful.
You like elite players. I know the Baltimore Ties. I get it, Worm. I get it.
Yeah. Erickson, give me your next must-sit.
Jordan Addison. Pretty underwhelming with Josh Dobbs at quarterback. No more than 11 PPR points in 4 starts with Dobbs. So basically, he's been a wide receiver 3 at 4 at best, and that's despite seeing 6+ targets in all 4 of those games. The targets are not going to go up with Justin Jefferson coming back. They're going to go down. So if we're looking at 3 to 4 targets for Jordan Addison against the Raiders, so-so matchup, not as bad as we usually see from the Raiders. They've been a better defense this year than in years past, but we know TJ Hawkinson's still going to get his targets because Josh Dobbs loves tight ends. He did it in Arizona. He's done it so far in Minnesota. Jefferson's going to be the one that's seeing the most looks that he's back and healthy. So Jordan Addison, like, again, another player that, kind of like Chris Godwin, where, okay, like he was a wide receiver 4 with Dobbs. He's not going to be better with Jefferson back because he don't see as much volume. We still don't know what we're going to see from Dobbs from a passing perspective. So Addison's another name where it's like, you can probably drop him too. Like what is he going to do over the next couple of weeks that's going to be, I need to keep this guy on my roster. Again, he's another name brand. He's a rookie, which I like betting on rookies in the second halves of seasons, but just the scopes of the offense with Jefferson back, maybe you hold him for one more week, make sure Jefferson is actually back 100%. But besides that, it's like, I don't really see Addison being a player you can start with any confidence for the rest of the season.
Well, is there anything to Jefferson coming back, taking defensive attention away from Addison and that kind of opening things up for him?
I mean, not with Dobbs at quarterback. I mean, it's different.
You're
with
making
Kirk
the same
Cousins.
conversation basically for TJ Hawkinson. I mean, that easily could just be true for TJ Hawkinson and not Addison.
What do you?
I mean,
What do you mean?
I wouldn't drop him. I think the upside is high enough. Again, rookie
But
coming off the bye
seen him
week.
be the target leader with Dobbs and do nothing.
Yeah.
I'm with you.
What I'm saying is Jefferson coming back opens up the field for Hawkinson, who could be the number 2 in the passing attack, not Jordan Addison, is my point.
I get that. I'm not saying that I would start him this week or be confident, but he is the type of guy that I think has at least the upside as a rookie in the second half of the season, who we know is talented, that I probably wouldn't want to drop him if I'm aiming for high upside options off the bench. But I'm not disagreeing on not starting him this week. DBro, give me your last must-sit receiver.
Man, it's Higgins. When he came back, last week, he didn't get any usage. He was the distant third in this passing attack. I mean, it's basically right now, Browning has eyes only for Jamar Chase. That's it. That's about the only guy you could start out of this passing attack. Because after that, you got Tyler Boyd. Tyler Boyd got a higher target share than freaking T. Higgins last week. T. Higgins came back last week, 64% route run rate. He got a 7% target share. Just let that soak in. T. Higgins got the same amount of usage about as like what, KJ Osborne last week? Nah, can't start T. Higgins. He's a wide receiver 4 right now, boys.
He's consensus agrees. He's wide receiver 39.5 PPR.
I've got about 40.
In ECR. Yeah, Erickson, where do you have Higgins this week?
Wide receiver 44. So I mean,
Yeah.
I think it's just over for him this year, and he's going to be on a new team next year. So on to 2024 with T. Higgins.
Well, I was going to ask you guys the same question about, Breece Hall, about like what do we make of this lost season? Where is he going to be next year? But it's impossible to say right now
Well, he's
before
going
we
to be the
even know
Panthers
what
wide
team he's
receiver
on.
1. That's what's going to happen.
I hope not. I hope not for him. I hope
they're going to shell out
that.
to sell the highest guy in free agency. Like, we got to get Bryce Young a receiver.
Gosh.
He went to Clemson, so he's familiar with the area. He's going to be a Panther. So
I hope
do with that
not,
what you
man.
will.
Yeah. What I will do is not be happy to draft him next year. Erickson, who do I start? Cooper Kupp or Cortland Sutton?
Sutton.
All right. How about Calvin Ridley or Jaden Reed?
Jaden Reed.
Jordan Addison or Noah Brown with Tank Dell out?
I think I just take the upside on Noah Brown. Just
Where do you
Stroud,
have
even though
Noah
the
Brown
matchup's
ranked?
horrible.
We're not talking about him on the show, but with Tank Dell out, I mean, we've seen him with injuries in that receiving core before have a couple of good games this year with CJ Stroud.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I have him at wide receiver 39, and I really don't think that the Jets are going to spend time trying to get Sauce or DJ Reed on Noah Brown as like the speedster. Like, they're really going to be focusing, I think, a lot more on Nico Collins as that really big body perimeter threat. And I think that could just open up opportunities for Brown on crossers across the middle of the field where he can just unlock he's just fast. Like, that's his game. So again, I'm not as concerned about these top tier cornerbacks because if he blows by them, like, Stroud's going to hit him. So I think Brown has way more upside, and I'd probably just take a shot on him, even though the matchup is horrible on the road against the Jets.
What do you think, DBro, quickly on that one, Addison versus Noah Brown?
I think it's interesting. I've got Addison a little bit ahead just because the Raiders can't cover anybody, and I think this is a bounce back game for Josh Dobbs. But I mean, we're talking about it's splitting hairs. I've got Addison at 38. I've got Noah Brown at 41.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you want to tell me who do I want to start, T. Higgins or Noah Brown, I'm going to go Noah Brown.
Wow.
Easily.
They are back-to-back in our staff rankings, actually, between the two of you and Fitz. DBro, DeAndre Hopkins or Rashee Rice?
Oh, it's Rice. Like, it's not close. It's Rice.
How about Chris Godwin or T. Higgins?
Oh. Good
Gotta
Lord.
start Godwin.
I'll take Godwin. I mean, I'll at least he's getting volume. T's not even getting that.
Yeah. Let's move to the quarterback tight end defense discussion here. We'll go a little quicker on these. Erickson, give me your QB, TE, DST.
Going to sit Geno Smith. Last 4 games against the 49ers, he has averaged fewer than 11 fantasy points per game. So I know he's great against Dallas, but I would not go chasing that box score on another tough road matchup. Juwan Johnson, sit tight end. I know Taysom Hill's on the injury report, but he was a bust last week. Had one of the worst games I've actually seen from a tight end in a long time. Popular streamer. Just don't go back to him. Look, the Panthers have been one of the better teams against tight ends. Elite. Shut down K-Dot in last week. So Juwan Johnson's going to be a sit for me and just someone you can just drop. He's not a tight end that's worth streaming. Pick up K-Dot because he's the guy that got dropped by a lot of teams after he put up the goose egg against the Panthers. And then lastly, but the Bills DST. That's who I want to sit. They're on the road against the Chiefs. 5th worst projected DST in the projections. And they have one top 10 finish in the last 7 games. Buffalo Bills.
Ooh.
Erickson, are you starting Geno Smith or Baker Mayfield?
I think that I have Geno ranked higher than Baker Mayfield. I'm checking right now. They're back-to-back. I don't want to start either of them. I probably guess I just start Baker just because Mike Evans is just on like an absolute heater and he's going to catch a touchdown no matter what. So I feel confident about that. Whereas, Geno, not so much. So
they're back to back in
coin flip for
ECR
me. Yeah.
as well. DBro, quickly on Geno, you're a couple of spots higher than Erickson is. Do you like his matchup better, or again, just kind of that glommy middle? There's not really anybody that stands out.
I mean, I like what we saw out of Chef Geno last week. I mean, considering what he did versus the Dallas Cowboys, I think that Seattle is kind of finding itself finally as a passing offense by getting more JSN involved. DK Metcalf finally looked healthy. Like, I don't know if he's been truly healthy the entirety of the season. And so, I'm a little bit higher on Geno Smith this week, guys, because the other part about this is Tyler Lockett's not on the injury report for basically the first time this season. So I think that's big, man. He's actually got healthy weapons, and considering what they did and they changed the game plan up against Dallas, we could see a shootout here versus the 49ers.
DBro, take us home with your must-sit quarterback, tight end, and defense/special teams.
We talked about this game a bunch. I mean, we talked about Cooper Kupp. Let's just take his quarterback, too. Matthew Stafford, not playing him. Baltimore has been a top 5 pass defense the entire season. It's not going to change in week 14. Moving over to tight end, man, Evan Ingram. And I know people are going to say, like, what the hell are you talking about? Did you just watch what Evan Ingram did? Isn't he going to get peppered with targets? I don't want any part of this matchup, guys. Like, Cleveland Browns have been the worst matchup on the board for tight ends. They're allowing the fewest fantasy points per game, the fewest receiving yards per game. Yes, they've given up 3 touchdowns over the season to tight ends. 2 of those came from Mark Andrews when he played them in freaking week 4. So if you're holding on to hope for that one, good luck. But I'm not, so I'm going to be sitting Evan Ingram. I'm going to have him outside my top 12 tight ends for the week. And the DST is going to be the Detroit Lions. I think Justin Fields lights this secondary up. We've seen Detroit struggle in the last few weeks. They have had, for various iterations of this season, their pass defense has been bottom 5. I don't want any part of Detroit.
Evan Ingram or Isaiah Likely this week?
Likely. Easy Likely.
Who do you like there, Erickson, Ingram or Likely?
I mean, if Trevor Lawrence doesn't play, then I'm not starting Evan Ingram.
Say Trevor does play. Would you still start Evan Ingram?
Probably not.
Over Likely? Okay.
Why would he play? Like, I don't think he's going to play. He's not practicing.
I don't think he's going to play either.
I don't think he's going to play.
We'll see, but
just throwing it out there.
Must-sit running backs are Breece Hall, Devin Singletary, Derrick Henry, Gus Edwards, Kenneth Walker, and Khalil Herbert. Must-sit wide receivers, Cooper Kupp, DeAndre Hopkins, Calvin Ridley, Chris Godwin, Jordan Addison, T. Higgins. We are sitting Geno Smith and Matthew Stafford. We are sitting Juwan Johnson and Evan Ingram. And we are sitting the Bills and Lions defenses. For Erickson and DBro, I am Ryan Wormley. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. We'll see you again next week.